Welcome to Rise, Season 3, Episode 3, in which Anita meets an Ewok. From Lausanne, Switzerland, where the government has reported that of, I think it was 50 ski resorts that were investigated, all were complying adequately with safety protocols, but where universities recently announced that we will stay closed until at least Easter. I am Professor Demian Hodari of EHL Lausanne.
And from lovely sunny South Africa, under the shadows of Table Mountain and along the canal from the V&A waterfront, my name is Anita Mendiratta, delighted to be co-hosting alongside the Ewok. So thank you very much for that, Demian. I have no idea what an Ewok is, but as always, we are delighted to have everyone here. And a warmest wishes of Gong Hei Fat Choi to all of our viewers from around the world celebrating Chinese New Year, a very special time for a very special community. We are, exactly as Professor Hodari said, Season 3, Month 2, Episode number 3 of 2021. Interestingly, this 100-day project that started to keep everyone connected, separate the news from the noise, has now hit day 301, which is remarkable. Rise will continue to stay with you, here for you, as always, as long as you need us to help you in the next normal. And then the next normal after that. So as we look to the future and as we look to this episode, we have an interesting one because at Rise, we've focused very much on making sure that we cover interesting aspects of travel, tourism, and hospitality, many that make you think, I never thought of that. And this is one of those great episodes. Professor Hodari, Ewok, sir, please, can you tell us what's happening today?
Sure. I had my reservations about this episode, except for the fact that so often when I'm doing research into restaurants and hotels, the same reports that are reporting on statistics and issues going on will also include retail because there's so many similarities, so many similar drivers behind the ups and the downs in retail and in restaurants these days. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from retail, and I'm sure there's a lot that retail has learned from hospitality, travel, and tourism. So it'll be interesting to discover that with our great guests a little bit later on. But before we get to them, as always, we start with you, the audience, with our first poll of the day. Which of the following will most influence your choice of international destinations when travel restrictions are lifted? All right, let's see what our viewers have to say. All right, Anita, your country's policy for returning citizens, i.e. quarantine upon return, followed closely by destination government's management of the pandemic and destinations offering attractions. Price is not an issue, nor is the length of travel really an issue here.
Goodness me, I must say, I'm not surprised by that response, especially as today, the UK starts its vaccine hotels. New Zealand has just indicated the same. These have become a norm. A number of days, anyone coming back needs to spend in a hotel at their cost, even if they live down the road. Very interesting. It's all about the regulations in and out of destinations.
Yeah, we asked a similar question almost a year ago, and there we go. Here are the results from a year ago. Let's see how things might have changed or not. All right, not so different, right? It was a little bit more about the destinations management rather than your country, so a little bit of switch there, but still seems to be the same two primary issues that are driving people's choices and decisions as a year ago. So, and I guess things haven't really evolved as much as we might have thought.
Indeed, indeed. And it's interesting, to your point about evolving, it's still very much out of our hands as to whether or not people can travel and their safety and security linked to that. But I'm intrigued by the high levels that continue. That's intriguing concerning the whole shebang.
Agreed.
Brilliant. So before we go into our next segment, which of course is Where in the World Are We? Please don't forget to send through your questions. Let us know what's on your mind, what you want to ask today. And like I want to ask, Demian, sorry, what exactly is an Ewok? I'm now very distracted by that.
Come on, I thought you knew this. This is the creatures from the third Star Wars movie, Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, and the Ewoks were the fuzzy little creatures that I'm sure you have an affection for. You're getting a little toy in the mail any day now from me.
The only fuzzy little creature I have an affection for is the grouch. So let's just keep it at that. So where in the world are we? February 15th, this is what we think you need to know. First chart that's coming up is looking at predictions around, as always, one of my favorite segments, which is aviation. Oxford Economics, which has a division called Tourism Economics, put this together. And when do we expect countries to be actually returning to 2019 levels of arrivals? Fascinating, 2022 is outside of the mix completely. We're looking at next year, starting to see some momentum, exactly, Demian, for the reasons that we talked about in the poll. What I found interesting about this, why did I circle Europe ultimately, from going from 21% to 91%? What I find fascinating about that, it's all about regional aviation. Those are where the bubbles come in. Flights being able to go from the UK to Switzerland, from Spain to Hungary, whatever it is, it's those regional hops, because that's where the airlines are going to focus on first to be able to get momentum of travel and trade going. Similarly, to a degree, when we look at the Middle East, because you've got the whole GCC block, but at the end of the day, hate to say it, Professor Hodari, but aviation remains the primary artery and the heartbeat of all of our recovery going into the future. Any thoughts on that, Demian? Because I know you told me to pause.
Well, I just wanted to point out two things. One is these are our best estimates from our best forecasters. We have not done a great job of this over the last year, right? There's been a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of miscalculations about how quick recoveries would come, where they would come, what sectors they would hit in. We're constantly being bombarded with new variants, new decrees, new cases of the virus spreading. So I just want people to always take this with a little bit of reservation, saying, here's what we're thinking. There's absolutely no guarantees here. And probably a year from now, if we're still here with Rise, which I hope we are, we'll look at something, we'll say, oh, look how things really evolve, either better or worse than forecasted. So just wanted to stress that point.
Focusing on three critical markets, South Africa, the UK, and Brazil. Why am I focusing on this? Because as you can see, the graph is not about travel and tourism. It's actually about COVID cases. I mentioned this last time we were on live 2 weeks ago, because this has become a real issue. On the side, I've indicated their tourism impact, UK, South Africa, Brazil. What's frightening about this is the fact that COVID cases, which were identified in these countries because of scientific expertise, are now having the flag of that country connected to that variant of the disease that's now evolved. This is a huge stigma that's going to be put onto three countries that rely heavily on travel and tourism. So the UK and the UK variant, South Africa, South African variant, Brazil, Brazil variant. Can you imagine how they're going to suffer in terms of prolonged ability to get people back confidently? This is an issue. We have one commonality here, that is COVID-19. It is not about flags, it is not about countries identifying them, because where they're identified has nothing to do with where the variant actually started. It's about scientific expertise. So this is something we need to be really careful about, referring to variants of the virus by country names, because ultimately that's prejudicing and it's going to prolong recovery of the economic pandemic that is following on from the health pandemic.
Yeah, and I read an article today, well, to be honest, I skimmed it, but it mentioned 7 variants have been identified in the US now, who's not doing a lot of genome tracing. Meaning, are we going to have the US variant now? And I don't think the US is going to want that, like all these other countries. So I agree, this is a misnomer and something we need to be careful about.
Absolutely.
I've got a slightly different piece of data for you. This comes from Jones Lang LaSalle from JLL, their 2021 Hotel Investment Outlook. And first thing they do is they look back at last year and they report that hotel transaction volume, so basically the buying and selling of hotels, was down 60% from 2019. No big surprise there. A couple interesting points in there. One is a lot of the volume that actually did take place last year took place in January and February before all the countries went into lockdown. And if we only looked from March on, that 60% is more about 90% down from the year before. Still a lot of activity from private equity groups and institutional investors. Part of what we talked about on the last episode, saying a lot of money out there looking to do hotel deals, waiting for distressed assets to come online, but because of maybe lender policies, longer term horizons, not making not foreclosing on as many properties, we're not seeing as much of that activity. What I thought was really interesting was this 21% number. So 21% of the investment activity last year was in resorts. That's double what it was the previous year and the previous years on that, meaning a lot of money heading towards resorts. And again, building on a lot of what we've talked about this show in terms of leisure travel really bouncing back first and bigger than ever. As people not only don't travel for business as much going forward, we think conventions, meetings, etc., not taking place, this demand to travel and to get away from home is just going to all go towards resorts. And you could see that last week, Marriott doubling its role in the all-inclusive sector from one day to the other. Clearly, they're targeting resorts, and all-inclusive is going to be a big demand drivers going forward. And as always, whatever Marriott does is generally copied by the rest of the industry. So keep your eyes on resorts and all-inclusive, both on the resort side as well as on the management side from the big companies.
Great share.
I do not have a second piece of data today, but I do have a good reason for that. We are being joined as of today by STR, and they're going to be providing for us a piece of interesting data for our audience via video starting today. So I would like everybody to take a moment and really help us welcome the one, the only Jan Freitag.
Hello, and thanks so much for having me. My name is Jan Freitag, National Director for Hospitality Analytics for the Costa Group, the owner of STR. And since the year had just started, I thought we'd take a look at how we think the year is going to end up this year and next year through our forecast for 2021, 2022. This is very much driven by a sharp rebound in the GDP numbers, which in itself is a function of more vaccinations across the United States. I think the outlook that we have for the United States is very much what is being mirrored around the globe as well. In most industrialized nations, vaccinations have begun in earnest, and therefore then GDP growth should increase, which then should spawn some travel. So what we're proposing right now is that because 2020 was the single worst year on record, where RevPAR declined by basically 50%, that the rebound numbers are equally as head-spinning. So we're proposing that RevPAR this year is going to increase by 22% or so, and by next year by even more, call that 35% or so, all driven by the sharp rebound in corporate transient and corporate group demand. But what a lot of analysts are wondering is, so how does that relate to the 2019 levels? So what I'm showing you here is actually the percent change of the 2021-22 results compared to 2019. We always like to point out that 2019 indeed was the single best year the US hotel industry has ever recorded, ever. Total room demand, total room supply, total rooms revenue, ADR occupancy, RevPAR were all at their highest level ever. So when you look at 2021 and 2022, you're seeing that the numbers are still well below where they were at their prior peak. So for this year, we're saying that RevPAR is off basically 40% or so, and that next year, RevPAR is still off by around 20% or so. So what that implies then is that yes, the rebound is ongoing, but we're not going to see 2019 levels in terms of room demand in 2023, in terms of ADR, in terms of 2025. We'll continue to report on this as the year develops. For now, thank you so much for having me.
Nice addition to the show, no, Anita?
I think that's so fun. And I must say, Jan, thank you, and to STR, because it's very touching that you chose to work with Rise. I think, Demian, that's really lovely, because at a time when a lot of webinars and a lot of programs are starting to fizzle out, quite honestly, those that are really being able to make a connection and provide intelligence and inspiration clearly are the ones that the intelligence sources want to work with. So Jan and STR, thank you very much from Rise and the Grouchy.
Oh, great. I think we're over to headlines, and I think it's over to you, Anita.
Yay.
Oh, no, it's me. Sorry. As it has been for about 30 episodes. I've got two things for you today. First one, aviation, right? In the US, the non-impeachment news last week was a lot about this, right? Would the US start to require negative COVID-19 tests for domestic travel, right? Flights within the US. Clearly, there could be some health benefits to that, but obviously the travel and tourism industries, especially the airlines, reacted, calling this impractical. I've got some other words that I found, but let's just go with impractical, not feasible, and perhaps even dangerous, partly because it would be so devastating to the industry. And I'm not here to take one side or the other. I'm not informed enough, and I couldn't do that. But what I wanted to point out was there are no clear answers still a year into this pandemic. Would this be a good decision? Would it not? Would it work? Would it reduce numbers? Would it cause so much more economic devastation that would outweigh maybe some health benefits? And it's such a complex situation the world is facing that you have to understand there's always two sides to this. And I thought this was just a good example of our industry still trying to figure out how to do things right and how to do things safely. And I have a second headline, not so different, but about restaurants this time. So New York City announced about 10 days ago that it was going to reopen indoor dining in times for Valentine's Day. I see that you got the flowers I sent you, Anita. But what I thought was interesting was the second headline, right, saying the industry was still divided over the return of indoor dining. And it wasn't, no, we don't want this. It was, we want this, but promise us you're not going to take it away from us again, right? We've invested all this money last fall to create all this outdoor dining. We saw the video last episode about the woman in California who had done that and then wasn't able to use it. So now we can only seat 25% of guests in our indoors in New York, even though other places are doing 50%. We're spending all this money to do it safely, train everybody, get our staff vaccinated. So we're not divided over having indoor dining, we're divided over the policies in which it's going to survive. And again, it's another example, trying to do the right thing, help the industry that's been devastated, give people a chance to go out, do it safely with no perfect solutions. And I think years from now, we may be able to look back and say, these were the good decisions, these were the wrong ones, here's what we've learned for the next eventual pandemic, which hopefully will never come. But I think there's a lot to be learned from these two examples.
Indeed. And I love the fact that you call this out, Demian, because it shows a lot of the optimism fatigue. People are tired of being hopeful and, oh, please God, we get through this, and then we get thrown back into it again. So I think it's a really interesting one that you were dealing with now, the health crisis, the economic crisis, the mental health crisis, and just, again, the fatigue, which for many is leading to flippancy. So great choices, as always, sir. Not bad for an Ewok.
I don't have the hair for an Ewok. So.
You're an Ewok elder. And we go into my first choice, which is from, admittedly, Toronto Star, which is where my home base is before I left Canada. But this really upset me because this headline came out in today's coronavirus news, first cases of Brazil, South Africa variants, exactly what I said about earlier in terms of damaging country reputations for those that are so dependent on tourism. And then Ontario reports 1,489 cases, 22 deaths, and then Quebec surpasses 10,000. We cannot have this competitive. We cannot have this virus to be anything but unifying of the global community. What I've circled there is the fact that when it came to the South African virus, which, thank you, they put as the correct name, the person who had it had nothing to do with traveling to South Africa and no contact with anyone who'd been to or was a South African who had been traveling. So it's recognizing, again, we need to not focus on these issues of distraction and competition. Please, can we just focus on going into the next normal, which is much more safe and secure? And to help us get through that next normal, we've got my next headline, which is focusing on something that's been really important for all of us this year, and it's been bubbles. Whether it's bubbles with family and friends or it's air bridge bubbles between countries, it's all about safety and security and maintaining hope. And I thought this was great. So I am not single-handedly responsible for this, but I thought it was great in terms of the bumper sales that we've seen in the UK. I was in South Africa. I was not in the UK. This is not my credit. Through champagne. Because a lot of luxury items are being now consumed and purchased and engaged with, because people have the money to spend. No one's going anywhere. No one's traveling. They're not going out for entertainment. And those with whom they are entertaining and socializing and loving and caring are those that they really care about. They're in that affection bubble. So I thought this was really interesting because it links directly to our conversation with our lovely executives and residents about how, because of travel and tourism not happening, or it being imminent, how retail has changed significantly because of lockdowns, lock-ins, and people needing to unlock their wine coolers and their champagne chillers. I thought this was great. So, and it was
Yeah,
in
and I think that's an interesting question. I'm just wondering, I haven't seen anything about all the money people who are still lucky enough to be working and generating an income that they're not spending on travel. Will they be spending this, saving this to have a better travel experience next year or later this year, or are they spending it in retail? And I'm looking forward to asking our guest about that as well.
Indeed. And there's definitely an undercurrent of because I deserve it, which is great. So for my video, now that we're rotating every other episode, I thought this was great. It was an interview that my dear, dearly loved client, Richard Quest from CNN, Quest Means Business, was doing just a matter of days ago with the CEO of Trivago. Trivago is a German transnational technology company specializing in internet-related services and products in hotel, lodging, and meta-search. They are worth, in 2019, $941 million US in sales. So Richard thought he was actually interviewing the boss. And then the real boss stepped in, making all else absolutely equal. Please.
What have we got there? Say hello, come on. Let's say hello to, there we go. Who's this, Axel?
Yeah, he wants to go to bed.
Well, wish him good evening for us. What's his name?
Victor, but he can't hear you. I'm connected via my AirPods.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Are you okay to continue? Oh no, Victor is determined.
That's okay.
That we're going to keep going. I'll let. Oh, we're even better. Even better. Now we're talking. All right. So Victor. No, Victor. It's Axel. We're talking to Axel.
I just thought that was the cutest thing because it really is. Now is the time of equalizing. And we've got this teeny tiny opportunity to get a little bit closer to one another because we're so far apart. And I thought this was gorgeous. I especially love the fact that Richard, who is a remarkable, remarkable person and extremely good with detail, he's actually a lawyer by training, ended up switching the names. So he starts interviewing Victor instead of Axel. But I thought that was very much, this is the new work from home reality, and you can be Zoom bombed from the ultimate boss of the house in his pajamas. So I thought I'd share that.
I have a son who's just a couple years older than that. I can't ever remember him saying, I want to go to bed. In fact, it's the opposite, right? Go to bed, go to bed. So pretty interesting to see a child asking to go to bed.
Indeed. And how lovely that Axel actually just picked him up and put him on his knee. You think that's from a staff point of view and an employee point of view, that's very real. I just thought that was absolutely lovely. So a little heart squeeze of a share.
Nice choice. All right, just before we bring on our two great executives, we have our second poll of the day that we'd ask you to take just a moment to answer. And today's second poll question is, what do you miss most about the pre-pandemic retail experience? All right, we had quite a few choices there, and let's see what people said. All right, in first place, social outings, right? So this going out with friends, social experience with shopping makes a lot of sense to me. That sensory aspect, Anita, right? We talked a lot about this as we created this poll, this idea of touching the material, tasting the samples of food, you who like to smell everything before you buy it. And there's this whole idea of try before you buy. And I think that's an interesting one because you can, I guess, try things at home and then return them. But I think there's a different aspect to trying it on in the store. And then me probably would have been then that first one. I don't miss it. I really have to say, no problem for me not shopping.
Interesting, because I must say I enjoy this, that the social aspect and social sensory aspect, social outings, that has nothing to do with practicality. It's just the experience of retail, which especially for luxury brands, that's been taken away. I think that's really interesting. You did confess you enjoyed chatting up salespeople. Don't you say you don't?
Only the ones behind the cosmetic counter. All right, let's bring on our executives and really look at into a little bit more detail this whole retail therapy, as we're calling it.
Great. I'll do the intros as they're about to come online. We've got two great guests, David Green from just down the way, the CEO of the V&A Waterfront. It is a leading destination for maritime, industrial, commerce, hospitality, and retail industries, a tourism powerhouse. And for many years, the #1 South African brand just following after President Mandela. What's fascinating about the V&A Waterfront is that it's 450 retail outlets, 80 plus eateries, 180 business tenants, 7 museums, 13 hotels, 22 historical landmarks, 15 conference venues. And it's responsible for 25,000 direct jobs, 75,000 indirect, and over 2.5 billion in 2020 in terms of GDP, supporting over 400 enterprises. He is the only man that I know that can multitask to this degree with all of his roles, which also include board membership, including the Two Oceans Aquarium and Westbrook. Delighted to have him on board with us. We also have alongside Mr. Andrew Jennings, a very dear colleague and friend who is coming on board. He is an international retail expert. He has exceptional expertise in terms of leading over 50 years worth of companies from Harrods in the UK, Holt Renfrew in Canada, Saks Fifth Avenue in the US, Woolworths here in South Africa, and he has been at the helm of these companies in ways that have transformed the power of the retail experience for those not just in the stores, but also now online. So delighted to have them both with us. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to Rise.
Yes, welcome, David. Welcome, Andrew. Hopefully you were able to see the results of that second poll, right? Our audience targeting the social experience, the sensory experience. Does that resonate with you, or would you have expected something different? Maybe, David, you could start.
Well, I think first thing I would say is it's music to my ears. So as somebody who manages bricks and mortar retail, I mean, that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for it to be shoppertainment, a social outing, the sensory experience, and the kind of try before we buy. So, I think, well, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but, one of the bigger trends in retail that COVID has accelerated is the online. But what I think is music to my ears is that your poll is saying people yearn to get back to the sort of best of retail, that sort of humanity, the interpersonal experience. So that's pretty good.
Good. And Andrew, anything surprise you in those results, or something else anything else you would say, hey, don't forget this. This is important in retail that that people shouldn't forget is an important part of the experience.
No, I'm not at all surprised. I agree with exactly what David is saying. And, this whole socializing is becoming a more important part of retail as the world develops. And whilst online has become huge, specifically in Europe over the last 9 months, and it's around 40%, people still miss this socializing. And I think the future of retail is also going to be about socializing, interacting with people. And whatever you say, people like to touch and feel what they're buying. And whilst they can do this online, it's a lot easier. And I think the trend is going to go for more retail, the mix between online and bricks and mortar. And people often come into a store, touch it, feel it, then go home and order it online, and then either pick it up on a click and collect basis. But the trend is moving dramatically, but no surprises for me.
Okay, let me ask a quick follow-up if it's okay. If it's really about the experience and the social aspect, and it's not necessarily about actually purchasing it there because we can get click, collect, etc. Give me an example of what retail is doing or can do to really make the experience of shopping even more of an experience that would be reasonable going forward. Post-pandemic, where do you see the experience going in these two areas?
I think that, it's a big issue that we have in Europe with a major lockdown, and we haven't been able to trade in the UK since before Christmas. So all stores are closed with the exception of food. And so there's certainly a yearning for people getting out. And I'm sure that we'll see a big spike happening in the fall and moving away from online. But online has been really jettisoned by this pandemic. But what retailers, bricks and mortar retailers, have to do, number one, you have to be online, no question about it. Otherwise, you're going to be on your way to the retail graveyard, which we're seeing some great brands going towards. Secondly, you've got to have innovation and localization and appeal to your local customers. And there's got to be that socializing opportunity. And it's quite interesting reading an article yesterday about Stockton-on-Tees. They're going to bulldoze in the UK. They're going to bulldoze their city centre, the CBD, and they're going to rebuild it half the size. And the rest of the place is going to be into a park and social entertainment areas down to the river. And I think that's a clever way. We don't need the amount of bricks and mortar going forwards, but that bricks and mortar that's there has got to be special, and it's got to become a magnet to attract customers to it.
Great answer. Thank you.
I'm going to build on that, if I may, please, because Andrew, what you're saying is absolutely right in terms of the specialness and the magnetic appeal. And David, you taught me an enormous amount since I arrived in South Africa early in December, after having been away for the year, about how the profile and the appeal of the V&A waterfront has had to change because of international tourism stopping, which was a significant amount of the volume of footfall through the V&A waterfront, but also the revenue, to now the domestic market. Now, being a tourism attraction, especially the SMEs, those beautiful artisans in the likes of the watershed, they don't have the appeal as much for the domestic market, because the domestic market might not want to get an Apple Watch strap that's made out of Zulu beads. How do you balance that? Because I know your heart is very much in making sure that the value of the V&A is keeping those SMEs alive, hopeful, and developing. Please.
Yeah, I think we've been on a journey, which is picking up the sort of first point, on a journey that, you know, the shopping experience is not a transactional experience, and it's an experience that there'll be a sort of multitasking aspect to it. So, you know, the idea that you can eat, you can go to an aquarium, you can go to a show. So I think it's picking up on what Andrew's saying, that it's not just about these kind of four walls in a box that's a bit airless. So it's a place of multiple sources of entertainment. And I think the point you're picking up, which is really interesting, is that you have a segment of retail which is tourism related, and we in the waterfront have been focusing on that because it's been a growing segment. I mean, up until COVID, you know, our tourism rates were growing kind of 9–10%. National economy wasn't growing at that rate. It's a great source of jobs, and it's a wonderful story. But the tourism related retail has simply gone off a cliff. I mean, you know, hopefully it's a once in a lifetime. But you know, they're obviously in shutdown, they had nothing, and now even when they're open, they're down like 95%. So the thing is that you've got to look at what is the essence of tourism related retail. It's quite a separate segment. And there's two kind of motivations for it. One is a sort of keepsake, a memento. It's something that, you know, you're possibly together with your partner and you want to take something back. You know, the most popular one in South Africa is the very famous wood carved giraffe, painted white generally, and sort of sticking out of people's carry-on luggage. There's a particular expertise, and beyond that, there's a particular expertise in South Africa. There's a real design ethic. We were Design Capital 2014, and we created a place called the Watershed, 120 traders. And unfortunately, all their business was geared towards this design, beautiful, wonderful products. But, you know, there's a limit to how many beaded animals a South African is going to have. So there's a real challenge for these tourism-related retailers. And, you know, what we tried to do was actually about survival for them. We looked at online, but it's interesting because the essence of tourism-related retail is it's an interactive experience. Very often you're speaking to the person who's made the product. very often it's related specific to that product. So it doesn't actually translate online particularly well. The other aspect to tourism-related retail is a product that is sort of hyper-local. And in South Africa, the obvious is that where do diamonds and gold come from? Well, they come from the mines of South Africa. So we have a massive diamond-related and gold-related retail business. And again, you know, it's an emotional purchase. A very interesting fact about the retail sale in diamonds is that the majority takes place after 8 p.m. And you sort of say, why on earth is that? Well, it's because the people engage, they sort of try, they have a drink, and then they have a meal, and then they kind of sort of consummate the purchase. And again, it's not, you know, unfortunately, it's not something that translates very easy to a kind of online.
I love that you use the term consummate the purchase, having the courtship, the dating, the drinking, and the dining, and then we go and we make the sale.
Wondering where I was going with that one, yeah.
You've got the Archbishop over your shoulder. I'm going to pull you back out of that hole. Over to you, Demian.
Could I build on what David is saying? Demian, please, because I think the V&A waterfront, to me, what David and his team have done there is phenomenal. Not great, phenomenal. And that is a great magnet.
Checks in the post, Andrew. Checks in the post.
Thank you. I think that it has everything that's going for it. And that's going to be a great survivor over this period of time. We know that, for example, in central London, we've lost 10 billion in international sales from global customers, 10 billion. In Oxford Street alone, we've had 50,000 jobs are going to be lost. We've just had the closure of major Debenham store, the flagship of top shops, and I could reel off another number of businesses that have entered the retail graveyard. And what we have to do everywhere is to look at how we're going to regenerate. What are we going to re-offer those customers? Why should they come into central London? It's not going to happen overnight, but there's every retailer has got to have a reason for coming to shop in their business. The days of just putting merchandise in a store and opening the doors and hoping people will come in, it's the triumph of hope over experience. They ain't going to come in. And we have to make a really good reason. So you've got to have a unique selling point for this. And it really has to be, I call it three-dimensional. It's a word that you guys will have never heard of before because I made it up. And the 3 Ds are being distinctive and being differentiated and being able to deliver to your customer. And those are critical areas for retail today and tomorrow.
But it's interesting you say that, Andrew, because it's almost as if you've moved from USP to USE. It's a unique selling experience now, not just, as you say, of the product itself. So
100%. You make a great retailer, Anita.
I like shopping. It happens.
I like that USC. That was really good. Anita, I think it's time we should maybe, I had some more questions, but let's go to our audience and take some of their questions, which I think is always critical. So Sarah, could you come on with the first question for David and Andrew?
Yes. Stefan asks, what are your thoughts on restricting out-of-town shopping developments in order to preserve high street stores and independence?
David?
It's an interesting question. I'm just picking up on Andrew, and I'll come to that question. The sort of double whammy that London as a city centre has is that it doesn't have its international tourists and it doesn't have its offices. And that's where the retail is. I'd be interested to know if they know how much of the impact is the lack of international tourism, which is, you see, the international tourism, in my mind, is not a systemic change. It is a temporary withdrawal, which will come back. What we don't know is when it's going to come back. But I think the question that's been raised is to what extent is there going to be a systemic shift in office working? And if that office working reverts to the city centres, then absolutely everything must be done to sort of bolster and protect retail. I mean, one of the things Britain has done, which I think is good, is that they've taken away business rates, which has been quite a killer on them. But I guess that's the market will probably drive it and what people want. And the answer to the question is that people actually want convenience, much more convenience now. So the out of town stuff is probably yesterday's trend. These big multi-centers, people want that, a lot more convenience is our view on it. And that's from a kind of economy, just a risk, and etc.
Great answer. All right, Sarah, let's get another question.
Yes, Gary asks, as both the retail and the hospitality industries have been hard hit during the pandemic, is there anything you have learned from the hospitality during this time that has been helpful in your industry? Or do you think that the hospitality can learn anything from the retail industry?
Andrew, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, the hospitality business has been through a pretty tough time as well. I mean, in the UK and many European countries, bars are closed, restaurants are closed, and the same with retail. It's been a pretty serious lockdown. And I noticed in South Africa that when liquor couldn't be sold for a number of weeks, a couple of retail businesses I have an association with, their sales were very tough, no question about it. So I think that they've both been through a very difficult time. And my sense is that, again, it's what can you provide your customer with? And there will be more people who will continue to shop online. A lot of people over the age of 50, when the lockdowns came about in Europe, had never really shopped online. Now they're shopping online, they'll continue to shop online. And as I said earlier, we've got to provide, every retailer has to provide that opportunity to do just that. But personalized shopping, I think, will come far more effective moving forwards.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Sorry, Anita, because the fear in the hotel industry is people will, not just will work from home, but they don't need to go to meetings and events as much because these can be virtual. So those meetings and events are going to have to make it much more of an experience and elevate the experience part to make people say, yeah, it's worthwhile going and not just doing it online. And it's the same thing for shopping. If I can buy it online, what's going to be there in that experience of shopping that's going to drive people out? So challenges for both industries for sure.
Yeah,
the point that David, sorry, David, you go.
I think in terms of who's learning from who, I think that, picking up what Andrew's saying, retailer bricks and mortar is going to have to try a lot harder. And I think the sort of human interaction, the interpersonal skills and relations that hospitality has is probably skills that the retailers have to, the days of you walk into a store and somebody saying, can I help you, are kind of long gone. You're demanding a more interactive kind of experience. They have to earn that. So I think we're seeing, hospitality, as you said, is utterly devastated. And unfortunately, hospitality probably has a long pipeline. So unfortunately, we're seeing quite a lot of people coming out of hospitality. And those that are coming, using those skills are kind of applicable to retail.
But is that not?
I'd like to pick up, may I pick up on something, Anita, that David was saying? This I think is really important. A lot of retailers, especially department stores, because we've seen the death of the department store in South Africa, they're basically all gone. And a lot of those real estate people are converting that space into office accommodation. And I don't understand that, because to David's point, a lot of people will be going locally. They're not necessarily going to come into an office, and there'll be a lot less offices. So I think that real estate, if there are real estate people watching this, they need to think about this very seriously, about what's going to be relevant for the future. I think what's more relevant is in-town living and more accommodation for people to stay in town.
Indeed. And I just want to go back on something that you've both been touching on. Is this not the silver lining of this challenging time? That it's not about retail and hospitality, it's exposed the interdependence. The same way, whether it's airlines, airports, destinations, conventions, cruises, there's an interdependence now. The lines have been completely erased. And so I always love the story of Sir Tim Clark from Emirates. When he wanted to compete for the Chinese tourist, which was 180 million going outbound 2 years ago, he didn't just compete based on price. He took away what was the critical barrier for decision-making of the Chinese market. He took away baggage allowance because he knew that the Chinese were traveling to go shopping. And you think, that's just so smart. So it's recognizing the interdependence between hospitality and retail when it comes to travel and tourism growth and ultimately trade as well. So
totally, there's a sort of merging. But the other silver lining, I think, from the tourism industry is it's often difficult to quantify the value of the tourism industry. What this is doing in absolute spades is just saying how sort of widespread, literally these kind of 1 in 10 jobs, you're seeing that level. So I think that it's a bit of a perverse silver lining, but it is showing just how important international travel is, tourism across a whole wide range.
Indeed.
A third silver lining, and I love these silver linings, of the whole pandemic has been the winning categories have been technology. Technology sales have gone up like this. Secondly, products for the home, because people are staying more at home. So they're out there buying home products and having them delivered. And the third is not children, but pets. The pet business and pet accessory business has gone through the roof. An organization or retailer in the UK called Pets at Home, their business has gone up by 40 to 50%.
Yeah, so the opportunity there is
a pet is not just for COVID, it's for life. But the other one I'd add to that is luxury. I mean, I think Anita touched on the luxury. It's funny, we saw our luggage category spike, and you'd sort of say counterintuitive, nobody's traveling. Why? And it's one major luxury, Louis Vuitton, absolutely exploding in there.
Indeed. Again, people think they deserve it. So very interesting. But I must say, this is one of those programs, Demian, that I love because the gymnastics of the conversation is just, I think you and I could have sat back and Andrew and David could have just carried on for the program. So.
Agreed. Look, I have to say, I learned quite a bit, and I think it'll be interesting going forward to watch how these industries, hospitality and retail, converge and find similar solutions, but also, probably maybe find their own paths. And I have to say, one concern I have is for obviously employment and how retail and hospitality employ a lot of younger people, first early jobs, the salespeople, front desk clerks in hotels. And I'm concerned as an educator of those people, concerned on both fronts. So maybe we can get you back later in the year, next year, to talk about how retail has evolved and what it's been learning and get some success stories, hopefully. So thank you both.
Thank you very much. A pleasure.
So good seeing you both. Huge love to you.
Thank you very much.
And I love the back and forth between David and Andrew, admittedly. I thought that was very clever. So did we just mute the Ewok?
Hey, not sure what I said wrong, Jessica.
You must never play poker. Honestly, your facial reactions give you away.
You'd be surprised. I'm actually a pretty good poker player.
Huh. Yeah. I have no idea. So I'm pretty sure you're with me on that. We move on.
We have, it's time for Total Knockout. This is a chance for Anita to try and defend a point of view against a stronger and more, I don't want to say likable, but I'll say
more modest.
More modest opponent. Grace, what's our topic for today?
Thank you. Our topic for today is, should vaccine passports be mandatory for international travel? Anita, off you go.
Okay, I am saying in 30 seconds, yes, but under the condition that they are correctly named. It's not about a vaccine passport because that naming implies the fact that you've had it or you haven't. That's what's really wrong. It's about the enablement of travel with solid information. A vaccine passport is not the point. It's a travel passport that indicates, like with yellow fever or with PCR tests, what your status is. Whether or not I have the vaccine, I've had COVID. So I'm different already from other travelers that have not had it, but might have had the vaccine. And the vaccine is not the cure. It doesn't prevent it. It's all about managing it. So as the Right Honorable Matt Hancock said, our Secretary of State of Health of Social Care, whether it's an international, domestic, or local level, we've got to know what people's health status is to keep everyone safe. But how we roll that out and exactly what's in it, that's the question. So information is critical, absolutely vital. Yes, we need it. Let's please just not call it a vaccine passport. Sir.
Well, since Grace called it a vaccine passport, I'm calling it a vaccine passport. And you know, you mentioned the UK government. Your UK vaccine minister called it discriminatory and very concerned about having anything like this. You know, and I'll give you a couple of reasons. One is there's no concrete evidence that the vaccine thwarts transmission. So yes, we're going to have this document saying you've had the vaccine, you haven't had the vaccine, you've had the disease, et cetera. Doesn't guarantee anybody's safety. So a false sense of security for travel because you have this passport or document that says that you've had the vaccine. So some concern there. No proof whatsoever about the vaccines really with the new variants coming about. So again, a false sense of security there if we have this kind of document. And I think one of the bigger points is this priority system, right? So I cannot get the vaccine yet. You, because you're so much older than me, you can get it. So now you can travel and I can't travel, or I can't get the vaccine, maybe health-wise, I'm not allowed to have it, or it's not available where I am. There's been plenty of countries that aren't really going to see vaccines for years, so they're going to be banned from traveling. I find this discriminatory aspect pretty important. And finally, the issue of I just don't want everybody having access to my health information. And I know we're going to say there'll be safeguards and it'll be in my control. They won't have it. I'll just show it, etc. Tell everybody who's shopped online or stayed in hotels whose documents and information has been hacked that they feel safe having very personal information, sharing it with companies, sharing it with airlines. I'd be very concerned about that.
I mean, great point. And to your point about it, we called it a vaccine passport. If there's one thing COVID-19 has taught us in this time, it's that we need to pivot and we need to be agile. Same as I said, it's not about the Japan Olympics. That's a brand. All I'm trying to do is rename it because ultimately these travel passports will let you know what are the regulations of countries like IATA's done with their travel pass. Where do you get the tests? What were your results? And it's allowing people to share. It's accuracy of information. So you as a traveler have more confidence going out. It does not say you're a good traveler versus bad versus vaccines, because you're absolutely right. Someone might have religious reasons for not taking it. That is their right. The opportunity to have a single centralized source of information, both coming in and shared out, is a critical enabler. The whole point about sharing data, I find this absolutely fascinating, Demian, because how many people have registered through their phones, through their QR codes to track and trace programs? Is that not sharing personal information? Because suddenly your track and trace might reveal you were somewhere you were not supposed to be, and the consequence is not COVID-19, it's your family finding out.
So you're agreeing with me. We shouldn't have this kind of document that has all this information. You know, my other concern would be—
agreeing with you. That's not true. I'm not agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with the importance of information. I'm disagreeing with the name of vaccine passport. Do we need a travel passport? Absolutely. I'm agreeing with you around information. However, information makes people more secure now, and we can't be hypocrites in being tracked and traced and then say, no, but I don't want you to know.
So I'm going to go, so a year from now, I'm going to go to a hotel. They're going to say, well, we need to see your, whatever you want to call it. I need a vaccine passport, travel document. We need to know your health status before we allow you to stay in this hotel. Oh, you want to eat in a restaurant? Wait, before we allow you into our restaurant, and we want to make sure that, et cetera, or shopping. So where do we draw the line?
Where we draw the line with exactly what you said and where you blew your argument a year from now. We know this is the next normal. And so therefore, exactly as you said, asking people to have a vaccine passport doesn't make sense because a lot of people haven't had access to it yet. However, a year from now, the next normal, that information is going to be critical to trust and security.
I think the vaccine is critical. I think the testing is critical. I think people's respect and wearing masks and distancing is critical. I don't think having a passport or a document that I have to show that says I am safe and I can eat in this restaurant or travel is the way to go. All right, let's see what people think here. Time to vote. Yes for the vaccine passport or no against the vaccine passport or travel document.
Travel passport, information, security, and trust. And interesting reversal of last time.
And is it close? It's close. It's close. I wonder if it's we each have our own side or people are choosing. I was going to say your name always goes first. I wonder if that's part of the reason you get so many votes.
And
okay.
I think the great thing is, again, we explore the dialogue with information. That's what's really important.
Lots of fun, and it's not about who wins or loses. It's really about the conversation and raising this. And again, it kind of goes back to my slides. There's no clear answers to any of this, and we're learning as we go along. So thanks everybody for taking the time to vote. Anita, want to wrap this up for us?
Can indeed. We're going to be wrapping up, and we'll see everyone live in 2 weeks' time for Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, looking at how many people through this time have looked at personal transformations. Very interesting, whether it's cosmetic surgery, therapy, going to boot camp, spas, whatever it might be. Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. It's all about how we see ourselves through this time. 2 weeks' time between now and then. Please drop us a message at rise-weekly.com. On our website, there's a link there. You'll be able to find the email address, which is riseweekly2020@gmail.com. Please don't forget to check in Rise and Shine, our weekly blog, which gets posted every week, thinking about what people are saying on the program and what's going on and how do we keep checking in on one another. We will be again back in 2 weeks' time, continuing season 3 with much love and thanks from all of us. Thank you very much to all of our Wizards of Oz behind stage. Stay well, stay strong, stay confident, keep your hands clean, and stay with Rise.
And thanks, Anita. Thanks to all the audience, the backstage team, and especially a big thanks to Jan Freitag and STR once again for joining forces with Rise. Have a good 2 weeks, everybody.
Take care.